Habs insider Arpen Basu gives his insight into who he believes will be the first Habs defenseman, or at least possibly the first Habs defenseman traded this offseason, and how there might be more than just that to come. We have to talk about what Kent Hughes is going to be up to. Plus, this is better than we thought, as some new revelations revealed by Marc Dumont in a recent article show that Montreal is maybe more likely than you think to get a top 5, even top 4 draft position. That plus much more coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. Jesse, we're going to get straight into the video, and we're going to open with something different, and we got some big-time Kaiden Guhle praise. As you guys know, we love Kaiden Guhle, me especially, as a lot of you guys probably know if you watched for a while, I love Kaiden Guhle, but The Athletic recently posted an article by Harman Dayal, NHL's future star defenseman. 7 players that deserve the spotlight. Now, this is not getting into any of these guys who are already established. We're talking no Quinn Hughes, no Adam Fox, no Cale Makar, none of this stuff. But guys who are up and coming that could be stars of the future. And in that little thumbnail there, you saw Thomas Harley. You saw Brock Faber, of course. But the third player they mention in this article is none other than Kaiden Guhle. They say it's easy to overlook him when discussing emerging young talent, but the more you watch him, the more you appreciate his potential as a future two-way shutdown ace. He goes on to say he might not end up being a star in the traditional sense of the word, but his ability to go up and down the ice, skate amazingly, make the right defensive decisions and the right offensive decisions all the time is underrated. Plus, he is playing the 7th most difficult defenseman minutes in the NHL. You see Matheson up there at 4, but he's up there with the likes of Chernak, Tanev, Pelech, Wallman, and Mo Seider. Jesse, this is kind of awesome. I love seeing Guhle get some praise, and to have him on this list with some of these other elite young defensemen makes me very, very happy, and it's well-deserved.
What a great list, and definitely so happy to see Kaiden Guhle start getting his flowers. I think he's definitely going to get that respect more and more, across the league as people definitely start to see him play. Like, at 22 years old, he's already behind Mike Matheson playing the most amount of ice time for these Montreal Canadiens, right? And the fact that he's doing so well on kind of a first pairing, but then playing on his right side, you have to feel like those numbers are just going to improve. The analytics and even the offensive numbers are going to just improve so much once he gets that left side. Like, if he can do this on the right, just imagine how good he's going to be once he gets back on his natural side. So, I mean, just amazing to see. And again, I think it really sums up this player so well. It's like, it's never a player where, it's like he just kind of completely jumps out at you offensively or defensively, but it's being really good both ways. Again, a two-way player. And again, a player that helps you win, a player that does those little details really well, right? Can surprise you with his strength, can surprise you with his mobility, how quick he is, right? We've seen him kind of jumping up in the play, having that amazing shot. So this is a young guy that's already so reliable, but he's just about to get even better, and I see those offensive numbers improving very shortly.
Yeah, this is actually a down year for him in terms of numbers. His first little while in the NHL was actually better on similar point pace to Jake Sanderson, a guy who a lot of people say he was also on this list. A lot of people say has a lot of offensive upside. Guhle frequently near the top of the NHL and top speed for skating bursts. So a lot of great stuff to love about Guhle. Love that he's getting the love he deserves in these articles there at the Athletic. You think Kaiden Guhle deserves to be on this list? We sure do, because honestly, it's seeming more and more every single day like he could truly be that number 1 guy. But on that note, we're going to transition into the second topic of the video, Jesse, and we got to talk about the Habs draft position. Now, an article by Marc Dumont today kind of did a deep dive into just how likely Montreal is to get that top 5 draft position we all are asking for. And if we take a look right now at the tankathon, Montreal is sitting in 6th last place. Of course, the Coyotes have played 1 more game, so realistically, they're probably a little ahead of Montreal, but still, it's a very close race. You got 63 points for Arizona, 64 for Montreal, 64 for Ottawa, 58 for Columbus, not out of reach either. But as he goes into, Montreal has the 2nd hardest strength of schedule of any team in the NHL for the rest of the way. Boston Bruins actually having the number 1, which is a bit surprising. They play Florida and Carolina down the stretch. But Arizona 13th, Ottawa 11th, Columbus 4th. But Montreal's numbers recently, they've been taking a little bit of a dip, Jesse. Now, the goaltending has stepped down. They've enjoyed a better shooting efficiency in the last 10 games than their competition in the race to the bottom of the standings. So there's some good, some bad for Montreal when it comes to where they might land. But all things considered, to have that 2nd hardest strength of schedule going forward, we know Montreal's going to stay close in these games. They always do against good teams, but it's seeming more and more likely that this top 5 pick, I don't want to say it's a lock yet, but it's seeming extremely possible, and maybe more possible than we thought just a few weeks ago.
And this is completely Kent's plan. And I know it's kind of hurt us for a little bit as Montreal Canadiens fans to kind of do this, but we really want to do this year right of just getting the best pick, possible here. And I think Kent Hughes is really engineered in a way to really maximize this opportunity. And, whether it's kind of, fifth or fourth, now where we finish, it doesn't affect our probability that much. But I mean, every little bit helps. We've seen even just recently, right? We've had a little bit of luck when it comes to that lottery. I've seen, in some simulations, the Montreal Canadiens jumping up quite a bit. So obviously the closer you can get to that first, you just want to give yourself every opportunity to really do this well. I think from there, we're really looking to be playoff competitors sooner than later. And I know it seems almost too quick to start competing, but I think we're there, Josh. Is that your opinion? Do you think that if we get this good draft pick this year that we're now then ready to compete next year for a playoff spot?
I think no matter what happens, even if we lose the lottery, we drop down 2 spots, we win out the rest of the season, I don't think it matters. I think this draft pick is going to be good, and for reasons we discussed on yesterday's stream, if you didn't watch that, go do it. We did a nice deep dive into some potential prospects the Montreal Canadiens could go after. I don't think it necessarily matters who that prospect is. Some of them will have an incredible impact in their first year. That's quite possible. Some of them might not. And I think Montreal doesn't necessarily care too much if that prospect has that impact right now or in 2 to 3 years, because they plan to contend for a long time. So having that prospect come in at the right time, even a couple years down the road, could be great. I do think Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton, all these guys are going out there this summer to try and improve the roster. They've said, there's no secret. We're going to get into that in just a second. But I think no matter what, Jesse, there are going to be moves. The Habs are turning this corner. This is the last time we're going to see a bottom 5 in the standings. But I think this pick is going to be, first of all, amazing. But I think, if you fall down a bit further, why not trade the pick? Do you need that player? Maybe. It depends on, who's available out there and stuff. There's like a million possibilities I could go through in my head. But to sum it all up, I do think we're going to see Montreal push for a playoff position next season, something that I can't necessarily say for a couple of these other bottom-feeding teams.
No, absolutely. I think if we're able to really kind of round out our top 6 and get a good offensive player, that's really what we're missing. That's what we need the most. Obviously, the better player we can get, in that, obviously, Macklin Celebrini would be amazing. The more if we could get a second, third overall pick, you have to feel like we'd be able to get an amazing offensive player there. That's really what this team needs the most. And then from there, it's just kind of that natural growth development. We got so much picks. We got so much prospects, ammunition to kind of grow the team through trades and other ways. So I think, with this prospect from there, we really have what we need kind of in the armories to take the next step there.
Well, and taking the next step, like we just teased, it's going to involve more than just this draft pick. It's going to involve some moves, and that's what Arpen Basu went into in his most recent notebook for The Athletic. Now, he's reiterating a lot of the sentiments that have been around the Montreal Canadiens organization, stuff we have spoken about at length on this show, but we're going to summarize what he said because he did frame it in a very interesting way. Of course, he has some of the best inside information on the Montreal Canadiens out there, so take his word, don't take it with a grain of salt. Take it as basically truth if you can, because there's not many people who have better connections. Shout out to Arpen, of course. This right here is a list of 12 defensemen who are on the team or have aspirations to be on the team, legitimate NHL aspirations in the coming, year or two. Now, you'll notice there's a lot of guys here, and before we get into maybe some of the moves that might be made, I wanted to highlight one guy in particular, and that's Arber Xhekaj. Now, the reason I highlight him is because of this whole list of every NHL defenseman, or every defenseman on that list that's in the NHL, Arber Xhekaj is the only one not under contract for next season. While Justin Barron also was an RFA after this season, he's in Laval. So there are some huge decisions to make before we dive into who he said he thinks, maybe the Habs could trade first. I want to talk to you a bit about Xhekaj and Barron, specifically Xhekaj. He needs a contract this summer. I don't know if the Habs are planning to lock him up long-term, to a bridge. I'd like to see him locked up very, very much long-term. Do you think that they are confident enough in Xhekaj, even with that giant list of potential players, to give him that kind of longer-term contract to try and keep him around this core?
I think definitely, but I don't know if they're going to give him the longer-term deal just right away, just because we have so many guys. You might want to keep a little bit of that flexibility there. But I mean, every team is calling the Montreal Canadiens about Arber Xhekaj. Seems like any trade, the first piece that they want back is Arber Xhekaj. Now, he is somebody that is really valued throughout the NHL. And I think that Kent Hughes definitely recognizes that. So while you could get this great value back for him, I think because he's so important, and he kind of balances out this team in so many ways, that you definitely want to look at some other options first, really just to balance it out, right? Because it's great that we have the offense on our D end and definitely more of that coming. But you got to balance that out. You can't just have the offensive guys. You need kind of the defensive specialists as well, which Arber's got a great shot and everything, but he kind of leans a little bit more towards the defensive type of guy at the end of the day. But I mean, let's look at some offensive guys coming up. We got Reinbacher, we got Lane, we got Matheson, we got Mailloux, we got Barron. Now, these last four guys, like especially Lane, Reinbacher does a little bit of all, but these last four guys, like they specialize in offense, right? So it's like, you got to balance that out. While it's great to have, you can't be having all of your defensemen kind of playing that run and gun kind of all the time there. So for me, it's like Justin Barron having already played in the NHL, there's a lot of value there. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a type of trade there. I don't know. Definitely David Savard's kind of come up. But again, he plays that important sort of role for us, right? So you have to feel like, wouldn't be surprised to see something happen with Justin Barron, right? Because he's a good player, but obviously we just have so many players with a similar style coming up. Definitely we want to maybe look at freeing that left side first if I'm Kent Hughes. And maybe looking at, even though there is a lot of, guys on the right, it's like I definitely want to free up just that left side first because the right side is so important, right? But I mean, you got to find that balance. That's what's going to be so important here to do. So, I mean, that's going to be up to Kent Hughes to really decide, getting that youth and then also with that maturity, but then also balancing out the offense and the defense as well.
It's extremely difficult to do. And with all these guys, like you said, trying to find that correct balance, and even there might be some guys not currently in the organization that can take that leap, whether it's a guy currently there or a guy they can bring in. There's going to be some spots opening up too. And you can see there's a lot of guys, and Kent Hughes, as he said, yeah, so the quote, "We're not in a rush because that's not the type of trade that happens at the trade deadline. It could happen at the draft or in the offseason," right? Of course, it's a quote we all remember from around the trade deadline when he was talking about defensemen who could come and go. Of course, Jordan Harris's name being everywhere. But one name that we heard a lot at the trade deadline, and one name that could very well be on the move this offseason, is someone like a David Savard. And so as you can see, in the article, he speaks about how Guhle really took that jump, grabbed that opportunity once Alexander Romanov was moved. Actually, Guhle knew that Kirby Dach was maybe coming to the team. He heard the trade. He's like, well, this is my chance. He knew Romanov was gone. And so he's saying in this article, Basu says that, hey, something very similar could happen with David Savard. If he is moved at the draft, similar to how Romanov was moved, that could open up a big right-handed D spot, Jesse, for, oh, I got you there. There we go. It could open up a big right-handed D spot for not only someone like a Reinbacher, someone like a Mailloux, someone like a Barron, a lot of these guys that are fighting for those positions. And since it's a position of strength for Montreal where we have some very strong prospects, I think it just makes the most sense for David Savard. I know it's a guy we've already talked about. Maybe he moved next season, but I think at the draft makes an extraordinary amount of sense, and Arben seems to think the same.
Definitely seems like a lot of our young guys are kind of ready. But, going back to that Romanov trade again, he was still a very young defender at that time as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kent opts to maybe go with the younger guy, which is tough because you're kind of giving up on some of that potential. But at the same time, the reward is that you're kind of keeping the vet around for where you need. So maybe instead of it being a Romanov this year on draft day, maybe it's somebody more like a Harris. Maybe somebody more like a Barron there, right? Which, again, there's value to having already seen them play at the NHL level. It's a lot of GMs, they want to see, what they can really do at that level, even if they're not all the way there yet. The fact that they've played this time is really, really so important, right? So, I mean, I feel like there has to be at least two defensemen that will be traded this offseason. It seems like there's no other way, right? It seems like kind of a minimum of two because we got about 12 guys right now that look like could very much play in the NHL for 6 spots, right? Like I am liking this list. I'm liking the players. It's a nice problem to have, but the thing is like you can't be too quick to kind of squander it either, right? We have some richness here. Now we just need to be really patient, kind of get the other things we need, but while still still holding on to what we have because obviously these situations are fluid.
They are fluid, but hey, it's coming to the point where we have to make a move. Something has to be done. You can't go with all these guys constantly. You're going to squander some of the opportunities, like you said. You need to give them the opportunity to grow, whether it's with the Montreal Canadiens or elsewhere. Well, that's management's decision to make. But guys, a trade is certainly coming. We seem to think David Savard is the guy, number one guy to get moved. Probably not the only one, but it just makes sense, doesn't it? If you guys have maybe someone else you think might be more likely to be moved, let us know down below. We'd also love to hear your thoughts on Arber Xhekaj and his contract situation. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel, guys. If you're not subscribed, we have daily Montreal Canadiens content that you won't want to miss. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.